Welcome to the Operations Science Podcast, where the art and science of operational excellence come to life through captivating stories of triumph, challenge, and transformation from the front lines of industry. Our distinguished guests, from manufacturing pioneers and medical device innovators to aerospace visionaries, diagnostic lab leaders, and major capital project leaders, unveil the hidden patterns and powerful insights that drive exceptional results in the complex world of operations. Join us on this journey of discovery as we explore the brilliant minds behind the systems that make our world work and uncover the leadership secrets that could revolutionize your approach to operations forever. This podcast is brought to you by the Operations Science Institute, the home of the science behind every operation. If you want to be a better operations or project leader, discover the principles of operations science for yourself. For a quick tour, visit the OSI Insider portal. The web address is insider.opscience.org, and be sure to check out the new book, Operations Science Applied, available on Amazon. Here is your host, Ed Pound.
Welcome to the Operations Science Podcast. For our next guest, in 40 years of operations, their company has never retired a single product, which means our guest is managing 120 product lines and 400,000 different bills of materials with virtually no automation, just skilled welders and craftspeople making highly customized work by hand. Despite that complexity, they have achieved on-time in full rates in the high 90% range for 5 years running. The way they did that involves 35 red trolleys, a scheduling decision that finance initially hated, and a very clear-eyed understanding of what variability actually cost you. Please welcome to the podcast, Christopher Morgan. Hey, Christopher, how are you?
Not too bad, Ed. How are you today?
Doing great. Lots of interesting stuff to talk about here, stuff that people use every day and they don't even think about it. But to get into that, talk about what you do, what the product is.
Okay, we're a company called Street Furniture Australia, and we make furniture for the streets. So it's public space furniture. It's not the stuff you take at home. It's not the sign you buy at the local Walmart or the hardware store. This is a high quality product for councils, government infrastructure, basically government infrastructure that gets bolted down on the streets and parks all around where you live.
Okay. And so you've got 120 product lines, 400,000 different bombs. I think that's a record. I've worked with a company that had about 100,000, but 400,000, I think, might take the record.
We like making life hard for ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So was that a conscious strategic decision, or did it just kind of one of these things that have accumulated over the years?
Look, it's an interesting situation that we're in, is because, we're talking about councils, and many of these councils have been around for 100 years or something like that. So when they design a streetscape or a park, that's a look that they want to maintain, and they want to keep being able to buy that same product year after year, because that's what differentiates them from other councils. So it becomes really nearly impossible for us to discontinue any product, because somebody will always want spare parts. And one of the things, we've got a spare parts guarantee that basically says if you bought one of those benches or seats off us 20 years ago and you break a slat or you break one of the castings or one of the parts, we will be able to supply spare parts. That's the whole point. You don't have to replace the whole thing. We will do that, which means you've got to maintain stock levels at some point nearly forever. So unless a product is actually unsafe, we will not discontinue it. We will maintain spare parts. Once it gets past a certain age, we may not hold the actual parts, but we'll make sure the tooling is still available so that it'll have a longer lead time, but we can still get the parts.
Yeah, that was my next question, because maintaining spare parts, I would think it would be, even a council would be reasonable to say, look, we saw this 20 years ago, we'll get you the part, but we're going to have to make it'll take a while. Right.
And obviously that's an opportunity for the sales team to go in and say, hey, look, you can get the old one, but it's got a longer lead time, but we've got all these new ones. And that's one of the big arguments is the sales have got, and they will dig their heels in every day about discontinuing products, because it may be just that one product that gets them in the door to that council every 12 months or every 2 years to say, hey, we've still got your product, and can I show you some new ones?
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. And, the thing is just managing that from an operations standpoint, because you don't have unlimited space. And if it's just a drawing on a computer, who cares?
Yep. Yeah, so we make sure we've got the physical tooling. A lot of our products are casting based so that we can just reorder those. But obviously there's minimum quantities and things like that. So the usual response is when something gets semi-retired, it's keep 10 parts, put them in the cupboard in a box and in the warehouse, and we'll maintain that 10 as a standard level, because that'll take care of the 2s and 3s.
Sure. Okay. So I know the answer to this question, but it's fun to ask anyway. So do you use a lot of robots and automated assembly lines for the kind of work that you do?
We don't have any automation at all. That's something every year or two, we do a big study. We walk through, we get all the latest and greatest experts to come through and look at what we do and how we do it. And invariably at the end of the day, they go, wow, you're doing a really great job, but there's too much variability. And that's the thing. You walk through the factory each day and it could be a completely different product mix every day. That's not even counting the powder coating and the different colors, but you'll get a different product mix. Interestingly, our order size is still actually, the median order size is small. It's a couple of benches and a seat or a bollard, in which case you've got lots of orders going through. We've got about 150 to 200 orders a month go through, and they're all different and they're all not very big. But each one is one of those, 100 and something different products mixed together. So the opportunity for automation is just not there. Even in the welding, where we're looking very closely at robotic welding and things like that, even then, you may only run it for an hour a day because you're only doing that one product that you set up for on that, or you can do it with that. And even then, one of the joys of our product is you'll get the council says, oh, that one, you want that, really love that bit of furniture. It's a fabricated piece of furniture, but it's going into a small children's area. So can we have it 6 inches lower? So that's the sort of variation we end up where it's the same product. And it doesn't sound like much, just having it, but you've got to order everything, you've got to bend everything, you've got to do all the drawings for that slight change. So again, kills automation.
Right. I mean, and we're not to the point where, a robot can just look at a part and say, oh, I know how to make this or weld it or whatever. It's no small task to automate the processes. Maybe that'll change, and we can talk about that in a little while, but.
Well, AI is doing it for everything else. So, yeah.
Yeah, right. Right. So we'll see. So, but actually, you think about that. So this is a good segue into an operations science concept about the idea of dealing with variability. People always say, oh, variability is evil. Oh, variability, we got to get rid of variability. But that's not really the way it works. I mean,
that's our business model.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the fundamental operations science relationship is that variability is like the area of a rectangle. On one side, one dimension is capacity, the other dimension is inventory and time. You can't maintain inventory, so you basically have capacity and time. And, you might increase variability, which means you need more capacity or more time. And people say, oh, reduce variability. But, if you increase the variability and your revenue goes up more than your costs go up, it's still a good deal, right? And so people miss that a lot of times. They're like, oh my gosh, that business is too complex. Why would I do that? Well, no, they're doing pretty well right now. So, they figured it out. So let's talk about a little bit about how you manage that variability. It's very interesting. And I mentioned it in the introduction, the 35 red trolleys. And before we get into that, maybe talk about this whole transformation that you mentioned to me in our prep call about, the decision to really try and lock down the production schedule, and a little bit of background on that.
Yeah, sure. I guess starting on the production schedule, I mean, that's the basis that any manufacturing plant works on. Is usually the schedule is God. It's the thing that everything runs by. We were not doing that to an extent. We had a very well laid out schedule, but because of the variability of our customer base, we've got a bit of a funny one where the people who specify our furniture being specifiers, and then the council owns the furniture, but they never buy it. They dish it out to a contractor who's the person who knocks on the door and says, hey, I want to buy this furniture because this guy 3 people ago picked your furniture. They're very much the weather and all those other situations. And the furniture is the very last thing in a project that goes on site. If they're upgrading a whole town center or a street, there's buildings, there's roads, there's all those sorts of things that have to happen before our furniture turns up. So that really is the cherry on the cake at the very end. So what we were finding, what had historically happened is we would actually get our customer service team to call up as the day before that job was due to go into production. We ring the customer up and say, hey, are you ready? Are you on time? Because we're going to build this and it's going to be ready in 3 weeks and you're going to take it. And what we're finding about 30% of the time, concrete's not poured, weather's been bad, it's rained, I don't know when we're going to do it. We're a month behind. So we would just reshuffle the schedule at the very last second. And that was the normal way we operated. So a couple of years back, we decided this is not working. We wanted to increase output. We can't do it with a schedule that we're ignoring. So let's get back to basics and just say the schedule is now going to be the king again. We will take the decision to store the finished goods. You've got to remember, we're not selling, it's not people have to pay deposits, which covers the cost of materials, or it's an actual account because it's a government or a council. So there's no chance of us not getting paid for that furniture, or we've already been paid a deposit if it's a cash account. So we've already covered the cost of the material. That's fine. We're not losing money, which even though finance really weren't happy about the idea of us building things that weren't being invoiced straight away, because they want to keep their invoicing to match when we made it. And if it sits around for 2 months, suddenly they're trying to work out, oh, hang on, we've got all this, invoicing, we've got all these payments that are to do with things that happened 2 months ago. So it made their life a little bit less simple than what it was previously. But by us following that schedule then the date we said we're going to build it, and when the stock was available, we made it. And we got about a 30% uptick in our output without changing anything, and if anything, making our lives easier because we had visibility into what we were doing tomorrow, the next day, the next week, which again, it's such a simple thing, and that's the way manufacturing normally works. But for so long, we had not worked that way. So by bringing that simple thing in, yes, we ended up with, it usually sits around between $200-$300 worth of stock finished. So saying finished is a bit of a tricky one for us because one of the things that is very different about us is we carry zero finished stock because everything's so variable. There isn't a rack out the back of the factory that's got 20 of a particular type of seat or 30 of a particular bollard because they'd never sell because nobody wants that one. So when we talk about the finished stock, this is actually stock that belongs to a customer. We're just holding it until they're ready for it. So it's a bit of a different thing in regards to we're not building to stock. We're actually building to order. Everything is make to order. The only difference is we're building it and putting it into stock. What that actually enabled us to do in operations is actually accelerate because we didn't just work to the schedule. When we actually got some efficiencies, we would jump ahead of the schedule because we were going to stick to that schedule regardless. So we actually started pulling jobs forward. So we started emptying out the weeks and the months ahead when we were having good weeks on the shop floor. So again, that gave us more capacity, which allowed for shorter lead times to the customer, which meant when you got shorter lead times, they were less likely to be ready. So the bit of a vicious cycle was like, yeah, we know we said it was going to be ready in a month, but we've actually built it in 2 weeks. Can you take it? And look, a lot of them will say, yes, that's really great. We didn't expect it to take that long. But a good percentage of them will say, no, we're not ready. And we just store it. And if we do it early, we cover the storage costs. But if we make it on time, from the date when they had accepted the date that it was going to be delivered, from that date on, we actually do charge a nominal storage fee just to make it a little bit uncomfortable. And that we would really prefer you to take your furniture.
So that's fascinating. Are you quoting lead times or are you quoting a due date? I'm sure with a project, they're giving you a completion date when they want it. And then how do you react to that to set a promise?
Look, historically, we'd very much try and suit our finish date or what we call our CDD, which is a confirmed dispatch date. One of the things we learned very early on is freight is such a wonderful thing, especially in a country like Australia where it could take 3 weeks to get to the opposite side of in Western Australia or up to North Queensland. So we were very hesitant from a production point of view of promising a delivery date because there's so many different third parties involved that. So what we did is we promised a dispatch date. We will have your goods ready to be dispatched on this date. So we would try and marry that up with historically very much marry it up with when the customer required it on site. So we'd allow for a freight. Our ERP system would work out, if you put in this date, therefore it'll arrive roughly on this date. We do that less now that it's basically we just put it in storage. If it's going to sit there for a couple of days or a week, that's fine. We'll just build it. But historically, we'd work on that ship date as the God date. And that's the promise to the customer that we will ship it on that date. All right, so that's how that works.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. You don't have control over when things arrive.
We do get a lot of orders for really big projects where an order will come in saying, we want this in 9 months. So we'll actually get orders in the system that aren't due for 9 months.
Right. Well, I mean, that's public works, right?
Well, it makes the finance people happy knowing that they've got that long sort of product line of work. I think we refer to it as the forelog instead of a backlog. So we sort of jokingly made up the term, we don't have much of a forelog, which makes finance uncomfortable, but production happy. We want to be well ahead of everything and not have a forelog. We want to be doing things as they come in the door and doing it really, really quickly and out the door. Whereas they like to have that nice, comfortable buffer of work for the next 6 months, which we hate because that means we've got lots to do.
Yeah, so we all.
Yes. So it's a bit of a strange one because we're, historically having that a 12-month, order book makes it much easier to schedule and much easier to buy stock, but it makes us less flexible because we've already promised all this work and we can't then do those one-offs and, you'll get this sort of big job that just like, oh, if you can do this in a short lead time, you'll take it off a competitor. So from our perspective, having that very short forelog in production means that we can sales runs downstairs and says, oh, we've got this really great opportunity. Yes, we can, because we don't have that big, bulky, a lot of work in the future. So it is a bit of a different way of looking at it. And I know it would make some people uncomfortable working that way.
Yeah, definitely. People just want to see everything busy, right? And they think that means that things are going well. And that's not the case. And it's hard to get people to understand that.
No, it's a funny one. If I walk downstairs and actually look over the view that you can see there, the view behind me, if there's not a lot of work on the ground, that means we're ahead. If there's tubs everywhere, which is what usually makes people happy, because they go, oh, wow, look at all that work on the floor. It's like, no, that's not efficient. That means you're shuffling things and you're doing all this sort of moving stuff around for nothing just to get through there. For a long time now, we've worked on velocity rather than volume. So velocity is king in our product line, in our production facility. It's all about it getting through quickly. And the faster it goes through, the more space you've got and the less rubbish you have sitting around. So it's all based around, hence the tubs that you talked about is an interesting one. We traditionally had, the stillages and cages and people moving things around on pallets and forklifts. But then, as I said, we realized, many years ago that medium product size is probably, 3 seats and a table and a bollard or something like that. And that all fit into a 200 to 300 litre tub on wheels. So we basically got rid of all the pallet lifters and forklifts from the production area. And we started scaling up the number of these red tubs that we had that just happened to be red, that could just be wheeled around. And they would just roll between each different section. And you could see how much work was in any one department just by quickly counting the red tubs. You could see, well, you got a bottleneck over there, what's going on. Purely, you didn't need a system, you didn't need a computer, you didn't need to look into the ERP system. You just look over and go, why is there so many tubs there and no tubs at the next station? We've got a problem. And it became a really good visual management tool of you just have a quick glance over the shop floor and go, oh, hang on, we've obviously got a bottleneck there because there's a lot of red tubs. So what do we need to do to fix that? No meetings, just a really quick glance and you could see it. And that worked really, really well. That's evolved a lot over the years. We early on, a lot of the production sort of traditionalists just said, oh, if we have more tubs, we'll get more work out. And it took a long time for them to realize that as soon as you're putting more tubs and more stillages into the process, you've got more work in progress. You don't have more work. You just have much more work in progress and you've got to move everything to get to it. And all your FIFOs start falling apart.
Well, that's a fundamental operation science relationship. I mean, you get a certain amount of whip into the system, but above that, all you do, you don't really increase your throughput or your velocity, or you don't really increase your throughput, but your cycle times just start going through the roof because everything's sitting around waiting. So that you guys are all over it.
Yeah, and that's the philosophy that we've run by. It gives us that flexibility, and it also means that we can change and do things really, really quickly. We're not, you don't have to clear out a workstation. All the work for that workstation doesn't have to be cleared out before you can bring something else in. So one of the things we did talk about is there's actually 2 black tubs that look exactly the same as all the other tubs, but they're black tubs. So the black tubs, if a black tub rolls into your area, that's the automatic sign, oh, stop what you're doing. Do what's in the black tub, shove it on. Yep. And there's no paperwork, nothing in the system. It's purely if a black tub rolls into your area, everyone knows, oh, hang on, I'll stop what I'm doing. I do that one and I shuffle it through. And that's the sort of thing that enables us to be able to, even when we got a full production schedule, and this does happen, unfortunately, where you'll get the phone call in the morning at 8 o'clock in the morning saying, hey, look, the mayor's coming to town and we've got to open this park and we forgot to buy the park seat that he's going to get photoed on. What can you do for us? And we can do from pick, create the sale. Usually we're doing it faster than the sales order can be generated in the system. We'll be able to pick it, powder coat it, weld it, bolt it together, and have it ready to dispatch within about 3 hours.
Wow. Well, that's brilliant.
We don't like doing it.
Yeah. You don't want to do that all the time. But I mean, and it's not, expediting is not evil. I mean, it's something you do just as you described for a certain small percentage of situations. And it's great to have that mechanism for controlling it. If you had 35 red tubs and you had 35 black tubs, I'd say maybe you're a little bit, a little mixed up there. But
yeah, no, there is 2 tubs and that's it. We've recently rolled out, because we've got a powder coating line, we can be really silly with colors. And the tubs have actually changed a lot from what the tubs are historically with our plastic tubs. Our product line has changed a lot over the last 4 or 5 years, from predominantly aluminium castings and timber and aluminium to a lot of fabricated heavy stainless steel fabrications, because that's what the landscape architects these days love. That's the look they want. So, but instead of a 3 kilo casting, you've now got a 30 kilo upper made of 8 mil or 10 mil stainless steel. So people are starting to get a bit tired, because that's where a manual process really starts to hurt you, is when you've suddenly got a lot of that sort of lifting. So we actually redesigned and modified the tubs. So they're now a trolley height. They're still a red tub. There's still a box on top of a trolley, the same volume, same size, but now everything's at chest height. So when they're wheeling them around, same footprint, same premise, there's still only the same number of them, but they have a flip down door, and now suddenly you're not lifting anything out of a tub. But we also have a very strong R&D and internal design. We have our own design team, designers, industrial designers, who are designing new product all the time, and they used to complain that they could never get their prototypes made. So they now have 2 pink tubs. That's it. You can have, 2 tubs. If those jobs come in, we'll push them through. We know what they are. They're identified. They're not something that's just sitting in another red tub that isn't a job for a customer. So again, it's a bit colourful, but then when you've got your own powder coating line, you tend to get a bit colourful. And that's the way the whole process works, just these tubs folding around.
I was going to relate that to some other clients I've worked with. I mean, what happens a lot of times with expedites is, what happens is you have your hot jobs, and then you have your hot jobs, and then you have your nuclear hot jobs, and people just get carried away with the expedite. And it's really typically a sign of poor control, because they've let so much get into the system that now everything's an expedite. And that sounds like you guys have done a very good job of managing that. How did you come up with 35 for the number of tubs, and 2 for expedite, and 2 for R&D?
Yeah, there was a lot of value stream mapping where we looked at how much work could be accommodated at each station, what the throughput was. And we started with probably about 20 tubs. But what we ended up with is we'd get these empty spots where you'd end up, and it literally was just like, okay, we're going to add 5 more, and then they'd stop and run it for a couple of months and measure it. And once we hit that sort of 35, all the stations were fairly well, loaded, and we did actually add a couple more, and it started creating those bottlenecks, so we wound it back. So very much just going through that process of trials and tests and measuring and watching. So it's rolled back to 35, and that seems to be a nice sweet spot.
Well, that's awesome. And the great thing about operations science is you can actually calculate what that level should be. And, if you don't have that, doing what you did, it just makes complete sense.
And as I said, we did a lot of calculation in the beginning, but we just found that some, that different loading and different operators in different bays and things like that did change those velocities through the plant. So to sort of take advantage of that, because you didn't want to have that person then suddenly waiting for work. So it ended up, creeping up. So we applied the science and then tweaked it a bit with some practical experimentation.
Yeah. So did you try and do anything? A lot of people are really big on line balancing, which can be beneficial, but the problem is you have so much variability, it's kind of hard to get everything to work. Did you go down that road?
Look, at one stage, we did look at that, and we tried to balance all that. And as part of the value stream mapping, that's very much, trying to have it so that you're not having things utilized, overutilized, or underutilized. But once you've got, all those different product lines and the complexity ranging from some of our more simple products through to our more complicated products, and sometimes both of those being in the one order, it becomes a bit of a nightmare on that. We do work on a system of hours, so we don't look at the dollar value of any of the production work going through. It's all based on hours. And the bills of materials have the hours, quite detailed hours into, welding, fabricating, picking, all those times are in there. So when we're doing the scheduling in the first place, we're working on around that 22 to 23 hours worth of work each day to go through the facility. So, and that tends to take care of the fact that you've got a really complicated one, in which case you may only expect to do 10 of those today, but you've got 20 of these others that are much simpler. So we work on the hours, and each department, except for the warehouse, reports on, how many hours ahead or behind they are on a particular day. And that's their measure.
Brilliant. Well, I've got one of our advisors, Jeff Bell, who runs a company called R Precision, does basically the same thing. He would be thrilled to talk with you about that. You guys share, great minds think alike as far as that goes. Back to the finished goods inventory. I know you said, so now you guys, what you've done from an operations science standpoint is you've taken the variability out of the process by locking in the schedule. And actually, that's what Toyota did with the Toyota production system and the assembly lines. They say they make to demand. Well, if you're making 365 cars a day, your demand is not 365 cars a day, guaranteed. And so it's a way, and you put the number on it. You got a 30% uplift in terms of throughput, and you got revenue increases, cash flows better. But it's one of those things where you're looking at the overall system and you're deciding how to manage the variability. Now, one of the trade-offs there is that you end up, as you mentioned, with finished goods inventory for things that you mentioned, the idea also of actually charging the customer for storage costs, which tends to incent them not to have much storage, which is pretty brilliant. But you're still probably going to end up with some storage. And, is it the situation where you have to go and rent a new facility, and or the finance guys going, well, wait a minute, what's the trade-off here? Because we love the operations guys to have it easy, but it's also costing us more money than we want to spend. How's that conversation go?
Oh, I think they love to look at the bottom line. And even when we use external storage for finished goods, the amount that it actually costs us versus you're talking about 3 or 4% of that 30% uplift. So whilst they don't like paying it, it's really not a big price to pay. It's more of an inconvenience of having to transport goods back and forwards. But as far as, yes, they're getting a 27% uplift for that 3% storage cost. And what we do, which is probably a little bit cheeky, is that what we charge once it goes past that due date, the actual charge we put on the customer for storage is actually fairly high because we really don't want to store it. So all it takes is one or two of our customers to go, yeah, all right, we'll pay the storage. That covers everyone's storage.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just by putting that disincentive there to pay for the storage. But some of them will just say, you know what, we're a month behind. There's nothing we can do about it. We understand this storage charge. We'll pay it. And that charge more than covers the cost of all the other storage we're doing at the same time. So as much as they don't like the concept of paying for storage, the bottom line says it's the way to do it.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. Another thing you mentioned on layout, you said when we talked earlier, you said that you might do a new factory layout every 3 to 4 years. You mentioned the changing the tubs because of stainless steel material. Talk about that. How do you decide when you need to do a layout change?
So basically, it's usually around a change of product mix or operational efficiencies where we just, we're still doing that whole continuous improvement thing and looking at better ways of doing what we're doing, more ergonomic, more efficient. And we'll get to a point where we go, you know what, this is the way we're currently doing it. It just doesn't work. We've got this bottleneck that we can move. And that's one of the reasons why we don't do permanent line marking in the factory floor, which is something that most places would, you've got your layout, you do your permanent line marking, and then we stick with that until we die of old age. And I guess this is one of the things my team are sort of used to now is that, the one guarantee in life is that Chris is going to want to change everything. And they're used to that after 15 years of okay. But they'll come up now, they'll actually come and say, look, we want to move that department over there because we think there's going to be a better flow between there and there, and we'll try it, which is really good.
So it's like that sounds like sort of a spontaneous thing. Is there like a regular planning to look at plant layout, or is it a combination of both? How does that work?
There is, we will run, so like yearly or every 6 months, we'll actually do a planned session. We'll get someone to come in and actually run a facilitated event where they'll actually get us to run through and mainly justify our own thoughts about what should happen. It's always good to get a third party to look over your shoulder and point and say, well, why are you doing that? And if you can't justify it, then you've got to ask yourself, why are we doing that? So we will do that once or twice a year, but on the fly, we'll regularly be saying in our morning production meeting, the production manager will say, hey, I was talking to the operators at this particular section and they really want to change the layout to this. And the reason is this, this, and this. And we're like, hey, let's try it. Because we've got no permanent, we don't have that automation. Automation is also an enemy to be able to do that. So we've sort of embraced the flexibility. If we've got to have flexibility, let's be really flexible. And we'll rearrange things. And in fact, the photo behind you is in the middle of a massive change up. So we've actually taken over a new facility and the whole bottom end of the factory is going to the new facility, which is where I am now. And the assembly facility is going to be rotated 90 degrees and change the way all that works. So massive redesign of the factory to get better flow, make it safer, easier, cleaner.
That's great. So let's talk about the people that you work with. So when they come into their environment, is there specific training like, hey guys, this is the way this works. Just you have to learn to live with it. Obviously, you need welding, but how does that work?
Look, there's a lot of onboarding. We're very, very strong. And because there's a lot of history in the company and a lot of buy-in, it's an interesting product to work with because what happens fairly quickly, and it happens to just about everyone on site, is that we make a product that you get to see in the public realm. So you're going on holidays up the coast with your family and you'll pull into a park and I made that. and I built that bin or I built that seat. And that's a bit unusual. People get really frustrated with their husbands or whatever because they insist on taking photos of bins and seats. And we've got a couple of our new product development email address we've got set up, and people send photos in. They'll go on an overseas holiday and they'll send look at this bin, how this has been done, or look at this seat, how this has been done. On train stations and seats all around the world, people, just shop floor people all the way through, will take photos of that sort of stuff and send it in, or they'll share it amongst themselves. So it's a very different culture in that regard of, because the ownership is there, this is something that I can be proud of because I see it. It's not hidden away in a machine or part of some other big infrastructure.
So how do you measure your people on the floor in terms of how do they know? One question I always ask when I walk into a new place is I like to walk up to an operator and say, how do you know if you're doing a good job? Yeah. And if they tell me like, well, here are my measures here and here and here, and they say, well, if the boss doesn't get mad at me, how do you guys do it? If I ask that question.
Look, I mean, daily we have the toolboxes for each of the huddle for every single one of the teams, and we'll talk about, how many hours work you've got, any what we call an IAR, which is like an issue or a customer issue. They'll be raised on that. So if we get an email from a customer saying, yeah, this was damaged when it arrived, or this doesn't look right, we'll be taking that up with the team. That'll get raised in that team the following day. So the feedback is really instant in that regard. They talk about how far behind they are, how far they're ahead, although most of them know by the tubs. They learn fairly quickly that if there's no tubs in my area, why are you talking to me for? I can't do anything if you don't give me any work. So for them, it's a really simple thing as well. A lot of it, it's that.
Okay, so that's interesting. So you just mentioned something that's very interesting. A guy's in an area, he doesn't have any tubs, he doesn't have any work to do. What does he do or she do?
Goes to the next department to help them empty tubs to free them up for the next department. So the rule of thumb is if there's more tubs in one area, jump into that area to free up tubs. Everyone knows that's what you do. If there's a bottleneck of tubs going onto the powder coating line, go and give the guy a hand loading the line. That'll free up more tubs for your area. And the warehouse guys will actually even come out if they've run out of tubs, because the primary measure for the warehouse is how many empty tubs do you have at 7 o'clock in the morning. And the closer to zero it is, the more on top of things you are. The whole rule of thumb is if they're not doing cycle counts or things like that, then go out into production, and they've been taught how to work, and a lot of them come from the production side into the warehouse. Go out and give someone a hand at assembly to empty a tub so that you can go and pick some more. So it's a bit self-propelling in that respect, is they'll just go out and, rather than stand around, they'll go out and actually just jump in and say, can I give you a hand unload this and help you build something? Because that'll then free a couple of tubs up, and they'll take those tubs back to the warehouse, get the next job, pick it, and push it through.
Yeah, we call that flexible capacity, and that's a great buffer for variability. That's awesome.
Oh, variability is what we have.
Yeah, definitely. But it sounds like you've accommodated pretty well and are predictable, which is, like I say, some people think you just can't be predictable. It's too variable. It's like, no, it just depends on how you control it.
You're just accepting the variability and then working out the tools you need to work with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, all right, we mentioned AI. I just have to check, because I have to check with all the guests because it's such a hot topic now. Are you guys looking at AI for anything? And what is that?
Look, from a scheduling perspective, we're definitely looking at AI from our purchasing team very much, especially because of that variability, trying to get that sort of, really thorough view on what's coming. So looking at not just quotes, but opportunities and trends in what products are coming up. The data is to an extent all in the system, but obviously trying to work out some way of getting it to mean something or be worth something, because we'll often get 2 or 3 different contractors quoting on the same job. So there's all that filtering, all that sort of stuff out, and because otherwise it may look like you're going to build 100 of those, but the order's only ever going to be 20. But there's 5 people quoting on it, so you don't actually have quotes for 5 orders. You've only got 1. There's a lot of that filtering that we do use that in. They're getting very much stronger in it. A lot of it we are looking at, and obviously people use it to tidy up their emails and do reports and do procedures and things like that. It's definitely something we do, yeah. So we're making sure we know what it can do, and we're sort of very much keeping on top of that. We are looking towards moving, and unfortunately with a 40 years worth of backlog of products and things, many of which were drawn and created in older systems than what, we're not using, the newer products are all in SolidWorks or something like that. But a lot of the older things, they're PDFs, and they're being able to, recreate those. That's the stuff we're also looking at for the AI, to be able to recreate that. And with tailoring.
That sounds like a great use for it. Yeah.
With a lot of that tailoring, the biggest lead time for us for tailoring a product, one of, say, a curved bench. So obviously, a curved seat with a concave backrest and all these sorts of things. the customer saying, oh, I really want one of those, but I want it at 3.2 meters long, and this is the radius. That's a whole new set of drawings. And that will often take way longer than what the production guys will to actually build it. So the lead time is in the drawing side. So that's our big focus at the moment, is in looking at being able to automate that drawing creation process. So it's back end more so than front end, but getting us the information we need faster and cleaner is definitely where we're looking at for that.
Oh, that's huge. Yeah. I mean, we've worked on large construction projects, and the generation of appropriate data and information can very often be the bottleneck. So yeah, that's a great application. All right. Awesome. Well, look, let's switch topics and talk about Christopher Morgan, the man. This has been very, very interesting. Where'd you grow up? What was your childhood like? How did you get to be at Street Furniture?
Well, I took the long way around. I actually was born in a little, it's now a city, but a country town at the time called Candos. And actually, the nearest city, which is where the hospital was, Bathurst. And it's about 4 hours west of Sydney, over the mountains, and definitely a rural setting. But came down to Sydney with my family probably when I was 15. Did the usual thing of, growing up, went to school, was going to become a school teacher. And that's what I was going to do when I finished school and went to university. But due to a few little financial issues of me having a bit of a car accident and not having car insurance, I rocked up to at 19 or 18 or 19, I rocked up to the local die casting plant, knocked on the door and said, "You got any casual work?" So at 18, I walked onto the floor. It started off as a general hand. And within a few months, I was being trained up as a tool setter, die setter, working on the big die casting machines. And a couple of years into that, they got a whole pile of work for Toyota and Holden, or GMH. So there was that real big push. There's this lean TPM, not so much lean. I don't think it was called lean in the late 80s, but it was very much the TPMs and the total productive maintenance and all those sort of acronyms that we all worked on, how to do Pareto charts and all that sort of stuff. So started getting very much into that, really enjoyed that side of it, sort of became more and more involved in the improvement side than the operation side. And then got a tap on the shoulder from one of the ex-employees who'd gone to another company that was very heavily promoting the implementation of lean, to come across and look after their lean department because they wanted to kick it off. And I'd done a lot of training and work on it. And that set the whole path now as a continuous improvement sort of roles from that company to the next to the next. I was very lucky in regards to that particular company. It was actually a company that had a manufacturing side, but that wasn't their core business. And this is their manufacturing side they used as a test bed for their entire business. So they would do a redesign of their entire structure every 12 months. Everything from team-based systems to rotating team leaders to, all these really out there type systems. That never worked. They'd roll it out to the main company. If it didn't, they just, let's try something different.
Yeah. Didn't tell anybody. Yeah.
But it exposed me to dozens of different systems of how to run a factory. And as part of that business, we did a global audit because it was a global company. And every 6 months, I was the Australian representative, and there was a couple of US, couple of UK, and the team would get together and fly to every single manufacturing site around the world and do a 2-day audit on their lean systems. Again, it's just that exposure to completely different methodologies, mindsets. I guess that's what really kicked me into gear as far as, there is no set way of doing anything. And there's always a better way. You just haven't seen it yet. And I guess that continued, and I worked started with die casting, then into heavy fabrication, then actually spent a stint working for Pilkington's Glass. So again, completely different manufacturing industry. This is a big float plant that actually made the glass and the laminated. I then sort of moved across to a more management role because I sort of got as far as I could go in the CI, and production manager at a finishing company. So there's powder coating, zinc plating, copper plating, all these bits of plating. And then for the last 15 years, I've been at Street Furniture. So sort of the ultimate playground for a CI guy is being the person who signs the document to say, let's try something new, and now the guy in charge. So
yeah, that sounds great. Well, that's fascinating. So, okay, last question. What do you do outside of work when you're not rearranging the factory, to relax?
I got a couple of mixed hobbies-wise is a bit unusual. I mean, very much have been for about 30 years into historical reenactment. So I've got a very large workshop at home where I make armor and clothing and swords and all that sort of stuff, and I use them.
What period?
2 periods, 10th century and 17th century. The 17th century one is very much the big focus at the moment. It's Eastern European. I actually teach Polish saber at a fencing school near where I live. So that's mainly what keeps me busy. There's obviously plenty to do there. You're sort of learning to use all the different tools and manufacture these things, that have to work, because it's not just about making something that looks pretty, but we're actually using these swords and sabers and weaponry and armor and clothes. So you go camping and we do all that sort of stuff, but it's a lot of fun. Do a lot of shows.
That sounds like it. Now, have you ever actually done a joust where you knock somebody off a horse?
Jousting, it's a funny one, jousting. I think that's the same then as it was now. It's very much a wealthy person's sports car type. So it's the really wealthy guys that can afford the Ferraris. They're the people that do jousting even then. It's very expensive, very, very expensive. No, I'm happy to stay on the ground on my feet. But yeah.
Yeah. That sounds cool.
Taken part in some really big reenactments. I took part in the Battle of Hastings reenactment in the year 2000 at Hastings, and there was 2,500 to 3,000.
Were you on William's side, or whose side were you on?
No, I was a foreigner, so I was a Norman. But yeah, there was 3,000 people on the field. That's something you just don't, looking up a hill and seeing, 1,000 odd shields lined up. That's pretty spectacular. It's not something you ever get.
Yeah, that is spectacular. Wow. Cool. Very cool.
So that's what takes up most of my time.
That sounds great. Well, listen, it's been a fascinating discussion. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm sure there's just a lot to get out of that. You guys have really kind of intuited a lot of things that the science confirms, and appreciate your time and look forward to keeping in touch.
No worries, Ed. Thank you very much. It's been good.
All right. Take care.
The Operation Science podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. Join the Operation Science Institute at opscience.org. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode. The views expressed by our guests are their own and do not represent their company's views unless specifically stated as such.